Welcome to another exciting and elucidating episode of the OmniTalk Retail Technology Spotlight Series. I'm one of your co-hosts for today's interview, Chris Walton.
And I'm Ann Mazenga.
And we are the founders of OmniTalk, the fast-growing retail media organization that is all about the companies, the people, and the technologies that are coming together to shape the future of retail. And she's back. She's back, Ann.
That was a little less creepy this time. Last time Kim was
back.
on. Yeah, you really made us.
You want me to do that?
I don't want that because Kim is much more deserving of an elegant intro, not one that reminds us of like Poltergeist or whatever we decided that one was last time. So
yeah,
yes.
Right. Yeah, right. But yes, without further ado, I want to introduce Dematic's Market Development Director, Kim Baudry. She's back with us once again, as she is every year to start the year, to share her expertise with us and to give us her take on the state of supply chain automation across retail. Kim, welcome back to OmniTalk. We were talking before we got started. What show is this for you? How many times have you been on?
I think it's 4 times with you guys.
Amazing.
I think so.
It might be 5. I don't know, but it's
4 or 5.
It's becoming regular, and I like it. Thank you for having me back.
As do we. Well, Kim, whether this is the 4th or the 5th time that we've interviewed you, it still might be the first time that some members of our audience have met you. So if you don't mind, let's just kick off with a quick intro and a little bit about Dematic for those who haven't heard of the company or just getting familiar with the company.
Sure. Thank you. So I'm Kim Baudry. I am the Director of Market Development at Dematic. That is the group of people in our company that looks over the industries and vertical markets that all of our customers operate in. It's kind of an unusual position in our company. I really love it. It's very unique. But Dematic is one of the world's largest material handling suppliers and software providers for companies that need our equipment and our software inside their distribution centers and soon outside of the network and into the network of the distribution centers.
Yeah, Kim, your position is really unique, and that's why we love having you on. For our audience that has not heard Kim interview with us before, she's very candid, she's very frank, she tells it like it is, and it's by nature of that position. So, all right, Kim, let's start with this. How would you sum up the state of automation and automation investments across retail right now?
Well, it's interesting. We've had a couple things happening over the last few years. So. Couple of things we can talk about. One is that in 2024 and we're predicting into 2025, pretty much kind of a flattening of investment as far as high levels of automation and distribution centers. And that's not just in the US. We're seeing that actually globally.
Okay.
We're kind of flat here in the US, and some regions of the world are actually seeing a decline in investment in automation. But, that's coming out of this. It's been caused by a couple of things. First of all, the economy, right? So CapEx expenditures have been kind of put on hold while interest rates and other things have been high. Some geopolitical uncertainty as well, causing some people
just a little.
Yeah. I'm trying to, I won't get off on that tangent. But so that is also causing people to kind of take pause. And then there is a third thing, which is kind of, we talk about kind of the post pandemic leveling out or of automation spend, which we thought we would kind of see the end of last year. We saw huge peaks in investment in automation in 21 and 22, and then a huge drop in 23, and then kind of flattening in 24 and 25. We thought we'd be turning the corner a little bit more by 25. That's not being predicted anymore. We're still seeing kind of stagnant growth in material handling equipment.
Kim, I'm curious, like that's maybe the trend that we're seeing, but I imagine you are talking to people who are not taking that route. You're talking to retailers who are making investments right now in that. What is their reason, or how are they justifying that CapEx for their executive board or for their boards, for their executive teams? Like, what is their reasoning for doing it?
Right. Well, I mean, at some point you run out of capacity, or you just, you look at where you have distribution centers Am I paying more in transportation than I am in, standing up another distribution center
Sure.
and holding inventory? We are seeing investments in existing buildings. So brownfield investment has continued. It's just not these large, monolithic, hugely automated systems that we were seeing during 21 and 22.
Right.
Like
So
those
more
have kind of dropped off.
yeah,
Got it.
more
So you're saying
pragmatic investment.
yeah. Got
Yeah.
it, Kim. So you're saying during the pandemic we saw a rush of money and investment in automation technologies, partially fueled by, probably needing to get goods out the door faster for e-commerce, particularly. And
Yeah.
now you're saying overall the market is going to be flat. The forecasts are flat, if not down in the coming years. So Ann, I don't know what we're going to do. I mean, we like talking about all this cool, sexy automation stuff. Like, I mean,
Believe me too. But
I bet, Kim, I bet.
Well, I mean, Kim, what does this mean for the industry then? Like what can we talk about today
Yeah.
that
yeah,
that we
that's
can start planning on at least? Let's focus on the good here, I
let's
guess.
do that. We shall do that. Because I'm not saying like everything's dead. That's not the message really. It's and the other thing is that I was talking to a customer who, one of our customers who actually did a lot of automation um, during the pandemic. And back then it was easier for people to get projects approved because e-commerce was going through the roof, right?
Right.
So,
Money was flowing.
right. And so the biggest problem they were solving for really was order fulfillment. So they put in, ASRS to goods to person solutions as an example to handle the order fulfillment part of what they were doing. But we did everything in kind of a rush. And we're now finding out that, whoa, we didn't, we need to step back and look at all of the other connective parts of the warehouse that should have been looked at if we weren't rushing, right? So when you stand up a really high volume, high processing piece of equipment or a solution, and it's only one part of the distribution center, and you haven't taken into consideration how you receive product, how you store product, how you get product out of storage, and how you ship product, you could end up with the really high velocity, high volume piece of equipment causing log jams in other parts of your building. So we
Right.
are seeing customers now kind of going back and just really looking for ways to invest in making those other parts of a building work more efficiently. And so I do see that happening, right? So finding out now that the automation that we invested in to get e-commerce orders out the door had an impact on other parts of what we're doing. And we need to really kind of think about operationally, how do we run those things better? And if there is a need for automation in those other areas, what should we be doing about it? So we do see that happening,
And
as well as
Kim, yeah, and Kim, are you seeing that the retailers who are kind of doing this look back at how things are operating? I mean, I think it's pretty standard that when you would invest in any kind of automation that you're coming back and you're looking to see how things are going, what processes could be improved upon. Are you seeing that retailers are actually able to reuse pieces of the automation? Like, is it that flexible where they're able to kind of make it work for this new format, or are they having to reinvest here
No,
altogether?
it would be they keep that automation that they've put in
Okay.
place. They have to do, and what we do routinely as a part of what we do with our customers is look at the end to end,
Right.
material in, material out, right? And what should we be considering? So again, I'll give an example that the customer used with me is that we receive pallets of product at a receiving door.
Right.
So it could be, all one pallet of the same SKU. It could be a pallet of multiple different SKUs. But what I pick out of is a tote. So it's a box that comes in, but I got to pick out of a tote. So there's a whole process that wasn't thought about. That isn't really very fast, right? That's a very manual, labor-intensive mess, actually. So you can walk in a building, if you walk by a receiving door and you see all these boxes just stacked up, there's probably there's a problem there in the operations. And so, I think that people are learning more that we need to be considerate of what comes in, what's handled in the middle, and what goes out. And all of those things are connected. so that we're looking at the right types of automation. We're looking at potentially changing some operations that might need to be, made more efficient, et cetera. So, you can come in and do an audit of a building, even with existing customers that have had, automation up for a while. An audit can come in and show where you've got opportunities to change processes, make things more efficient. We can do audits on equipment to see that it's, is there a problem that's causing this log jam somewhere that we might be able to, to fix. So I think people right now are just taking what they have and making it work better, like sweat. There's a real focus on sweating their assets. So I've
not heard that term before. What does sweating the assets mean?
I thought it's overused and cliche. I hope not. So
it could be. It could be.
Okay.
It's new to me though, Kim. So I imagine if it's new to me, there may be one more person that's listening that doesn't know that. I could be wrong though.
No. So it's basically I've made an investment. I have these buildings out there. I'm not going to be able to put up new buildings, and I'm probably not going to get approval to do a large automation project. So I've got to look at what I do have and make it run better, run more efficiently. I've got to look at the processes, which includes, the people, the automation, the whole thing, make sure that those are running effectively. And then even, we do from a customer's service and lifecycle support, we come in and look at, again, the equipment. Are we having misses on a photo eye and things are, not getting diverted the way they are in a conveyor system? Are we, we even do like audits on lights and things like that we can start looking at energy efficiency. So, there's lots of things that you can do that don't involve a CapEx expenditure to make your systems run more smoothly. And I think that's kind of what people are focusing on right now. It's not saying they're not doing any automation. They're just kind of keeping steady. We're not seeing this huge peak that we did in 21, 22.
Got it. So they're sweating their assets off, huh? It sounds like a new Richard Simmons workout video, I knew God rest his soul, but yeah, it sounds like that's what they're doing. But Kim, what I take away from you is there's two reasons for that approach, and it's all because of the capital constraints that we're seeing right now. So one is
go ahead. And uncertainty.
And uncertainty, right? Capital constraint combined with uncertainty. Yep. And the reasons for that are that in the first instance you said, like, the pandemic, people rushed into it and they deployed systems where they are kind of still working through the tilts on it, and they have to get those tilts figured out to keep their operations running smoothly. And then the second piece is just the fact that, you've got to reinvest in the buildings because the buildings are getting older and you've got to keep them up to speed and
right.
As working as well as they possibly can. But I'm curious, like, we always talk on our show, like, with every business decision, there's also a cost. So what are some of if that's what the industry is doing in mass, sweating their assets, what are the costs or watch outs to that approach? Like, I mean, I imagine some of these buildings are getting quite old too. So can that approach last?
It can last to a certain extent. So, we've seen customers, I know maybe it's actually, there's a little bit of good in this too, beyond the fact that we're going to be smarter about making decisions. But I look at things like, maybe we're getting a little positive tick on from a sustainability perspective, which is kind of weird. But I'm going to use an example of another customer who has very large regional distribution centers. And they have decided, rather than building new, 100,000 square feet or something like that, e-commerce DCs, that they would find that space in an existing large 500,000 or 1 million square foot regional distribution center to do their e-commerce fulfillment out of. So, as much as I like people to build new buildings, they're making do with the building that they already have, and they're using the space more efficiently. So, I mean, that's an example of some of the things, that I'm seeing customers do. I think, there'll be a time at which that building, for example, there is no more space, right? So you cannot take in any more SKUs to store, and you can't take any more volume to ship. And so that will turn. And I think that, the people that we get reports from are saying, we'll see an upturn in 2026. we heard that about 2025. But
so you're skeptical.
I'm a little skeptical. I just think, again, I think there is a ton of volatility and uncertainty right now that is it's going to cause another pullback, I think. But at some point, people have to, they're going to have to hit the volumes that they need to either ship to their stores or to their customers. They're going to have to build. But again, I think we talked about this a long time ago when we talked about close to consumer.
Mm-hmm.
We are definitely seeing the retailers talking about building these smaller, buildings that use somewhat automated solutions, but also more flexible solutions. So AMRs that can fit in a place where you're not certain how the fulfillment's going to work out. You want to test it, stand up a building, but you don't want to bolt things to the ground. Mm-hmm. So we're seeing people do that, but also, even in existing buildings that have a lot of forklift trucks, for instance, they're looking at automated guided vehicles to take the place where they can't get people to drive a forklift truck. So, there's just little inching forward of improvements. And I just think that we're going to continue to see that for at least another year. So it's really important to think about, who do I pull in? And I will give a little plug for my company. Who do I pull in to talk about, we have to talk about, first of all, an audit of the operations. What can I be doing differently from receiving to shipping that might improve what we're doing? And also after the fact, once I've got something installed, are my people properly trained to know how to use the equipment to get as much out of it as you can? So, there's operational training that can happen after you buy something that's really important to think about. And then also looking at the full, I've talked about this, I think, every time I talk to you guys, but it's about looking at your full network, including your stores, right? Where are you going to get, there's a lot of companies that are filling e-commerce orders out of their stores, which is also potentially part of the reason why we're not seeing e-commerce buildings being stood up. Right. So, it's all of this stuff combined. It's the interest rates, the uncertainty, and the fact that people are just trying new things to, delight their customers, basically. And it could be, I'm using my store to do all my e-commerce fulfillment.
Mm-hmm. Kim, the other interesting aspect that I always like talking to you about when we have you on is, if the retailers are taking the sweat the assets approach, the automation hardware side is one thing, but software also comes into play in that equation too. And so with the rise of AI and ML, what's your take on that in terms of the investments we'll see, in the software side? Will we see that, and in what way, and in what will people be focused on using it to do?
Yeah, absolutely. It's the software is probably going to be the biggest areas of investment, I think, over the next couple of years. So again, so you can look at what we call like control tower, which measures the health of your equipment. It can tell you, it can monitor anything you really want it to do. So how's my automation working? Also, I can tell you, how many trucks or how many tires should I have in reserve for my fleet, because you tend to go through tires so long. So there's things like that are getting a lot of attention right now, again, about making things more efficient with what I have. Maybe that's what's happening. It's kind of like a pause to take a breath and say, I've done all these things. Now I can't right now, but what else could I do to make things better? So software is going to be a big part. So the control tower aspect, looking at AI and machine learning to say, first of all, I can make predictive analytics about equipment that we think are going to go down, right? So we keep seeing a photo eye that's missing something going by it, or a belt that isn't working properly. So we can alert, a maintenance person or somebody that's in charge of the floor to say, hey, this is happening over on repeat. We think you need to look at this, and they can do preventative maintenance. So that's one thing. But the other thing that I think is going to be really exciting is when we start working with digital twins so some of that stuff that we were talking about, like if I were able to stand up a twin of what I'm doing, and I could simulate if I messed around with picking, what does that do to my receiving? those are some of the things that will be coming, I think will be really amazing with the software that's coming out, being able to test before you do something, with the digital twin. So, and simulate and try different things. So I think that there will be a lot of focus on that as well as continued focus on the network inventory visibility discussion that we've had in the past, knowing where my inventory is at. So software, I think, will be the key over the next few years.
And Kim, is there anything else that you've seen people? Because I love this idea of like, yes, let's evaluate after we've already made the investment. But my guess is that a lot of retailers, especially executive teams who are deciding how much money you're going to continue to put into this, are asking like, how else might you get a better picture of how to better invest the second time around? Are there any other tools? You mentioned digital twins, but are there any other tools that you're seeing retailers use or automation teams use to try to sell through and say like, this is how we're going to do it better next time?
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's a tool. Well, I think that simulation gives both sides an opportunity to say, if I do this, it impacts that. But I think that the really important thing to do is think about pulling in somebody that can support you and can act as even a consultant, right? To say, you have to consider all these different things, like how will this one thing impact another? And I think people have learned, COVID probably taught us, if you put a Band-Aid, I don't know how to give you a picture in your head, but it's like, I've got it, let's say that I've got a hole in a hose, and in one part of it, the water's just gushing out, and I've stamped that over, and then there's still a little,
Yeah.
trickle over here, and that becomes the next thing you got to try to deal with. Is so I think that people have learned, and it also could be right why some people aren't jumping in to make large investments now. They're trying to tackle, things from a holistic perspective. So without using software and AI and some things like that, the next best thing is studies inside of a building.
Okay.
People and the automation. So and that's what we've done traditionally, right? So what the AI and the digital twin will give you is speed.
Okay. They just make that process get you to your answers or to your optimizations much more quickly than having to manually do that process. That makes sense.
Yeah.
They probably enable you to do things you can't do with regular studies too, right? They get you into new arenas as well, right, Kim?
Yeah, because one of the hardest things to do actually is to justify putting in an automation in an existing building, because people are working, operations are going. Some of our customers work 3 shifts. So that's why it's also really hard to justify doing anything inside those buildings, is because you have to have downtime to put in automation. But I think that that's another beauty of having the simulation, because you can't necessarily stop an operation, say turn this switch on and then run it this way and see if that's better, right? It doesn't work like that. So that's why I think the software will be really exciting.
And I have to imagine that also comes into or brings into question kind of like people and what the people's tasks, like you mentioned, are too, not just how the automation is working, but where you might want to deploy your human workforce versus like, is this a place to add automation, add robotics, or to speed up the process? Is that what you're finding?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, when you think about anything that is the last touch before a product reaches a consumer, you don't necessarily want to give that to automation. So, when you're doing value-added services, or you're doing that last confirmation that things are accurate, which is super important when you're dealing with e-commerce, those things are, meant for humans. The other thing that we're learning, and you'll hear more about soon from us, is a partnership that we're going to be coming out with. And you guys will be talking about soon, I think. But the company that we're partnering with has learned, and it has to do with fulfillment. There's in using your stores for fulfillment basis, right? So when you take a store employee, we've talked about this too in the past.
Yeah.
So you take a store employee who is all about customer service, and I want to make you happy. Well, they should be. That's their job. I'm in the store, and I want to help the customer, and you try to make them run a piece of equipment. Those two things do not go together necessarily. So those are things too that we learned is like, use people with certain talents to do certain things and people with other talents to do other things. But I think it's where the human touch doesn't go away is those things, but right before that product is going to touch my door or your door, my experience with it, the brand in a store, you want those to be accurate. So
Yeah. It's a great question, Ann, because I
yeah,
mean, the other aspect of digital twins is like you can't redeploy your workforce in these buildings either because they're working three shifts. So you gotta use, simulations like that to get to the right answer. All right, Kim, let's get you out of here on this. I think Ann and I would lose our pundit card, our media card, if we didn't ask you this next question, and that is around tariffs. Okay, there's been. Oh yeah, we're gonna
Kim's
do it.
like,
We're gonna
wait a
talk about it.
second.
We're gonna
Wait a
talk about it.
second.
We're gonna talk about it. This could be the understatement of the year already, but there's been a lot of noise on this topic of late. We don't know which way they're gonna go either. Let's be frank. We don't know which countries are gonna affect, how they're gonna roll out. So my final question to you is, how do you think tariffs will impact what we've been discussing thus far on this podcast, if at all? Like, what do you think? What do you think?
well, I think the unfortunate thing that would happen is it will delay investments even more, because somebody's got to pick up the cost of increased cost of goods, right? So first it'll be the retailer, and then it'll be the consumer, and then we're talking about not spending money again. So, without getting political, I think it's a bad idea. I mean, I think people are starting to realize that. There's going to be a session at the Retail Industry Leaders Association meeting in a couple of weeks all around tariffs. And when we were planning for it, we were talking about, China and and Southern Asia, right? And what those might be looking like. But now they're having to have discussions about Mexico and Canada, which, it's not easy for a company to completely change its supply chain and where you're getting things from. So having to do that means they stop doing everything else and they're trying to figure out where do I get product from now? And standing up, it sounds lovely, like if we can make everything in the United States, but we can't afford to. And the timeline to have that happen is pretty long. So I think I like not to talk about tariffs. I like not to think about them, but I have to think about them every day. As part of my job, we have to, we are keeping a really close eye on how they're going to be impacting our customers. So, yeah.
I mean, Kim, it brings up a question though, like maybe not, but is there a possibility that adding automation or even sweating your existing automation, this cool new term that I've learned this session, but like, is there a chance that that's where retailers could recoup some of these costs that they're getting, that, instead of passing those tariffs on and their full amount to the consumer, is there an opportunity for them to, because of the flexibility of the automation, for them to be able to take some of these out?
Somewhat. I just don't think to a great extent. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I think they're going to have to be focusing on keeping their profit levels where they need them to be, right? So
sure.
If it impacts their bottom line and they can't, I mean, I'm sure that automation always saves human labor. Usually it should, right? Otherwise you don't put it in. And I don't say just save. Sometimes you don't have people to do the job,
right,
in certain places, right? So so there's a labor component, there's a space component, which is becoming more and more important. But at the end of the day, you can only do so much, right? To eke out savings. I'm not an economist, so I can't give 100%. I just think at the end of the day, the tariffs will not be good for the end consumer, which then therefore will not be good for our customers, right? So I don't know.
Well, even if we don't go that far, Kim, I think I'd go back to when you corrected me in the beginning. You said, and there's also uncertainty that is a factor here. And so what I hear or what I think about is, uncertainty is never good for investment because you want to know what you're investing in and what the outlook looks like. And so as long as we stay in this degree of uncertainty, there is a legitimate question about the level of investment we'll see, particularly in this topic around supply chain automation. And that's already been constrained given the factors we've already discussed. So yeah, it could potentially exacerbate that to some degree.
I think uncertainty is not our friend. So
well, one thing we are certain about, Kim, is that as the retailers and our audience are listening right now, you are an exceptional resource for them to have, and for them to be able to reach out to. If they were listening to this conversation, they're struggling with how to kind of make these things, figure out the next best move, or make these types of automation work for them. Is there a great place for them to reach out to you, to get in contact with you? How do you want people to reach out after this event, Kim?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, just Kim Baudry, Baudry. And of course, our website, dematic.com, Dematic.com. Or I'm going to give you my very long email address because I have a really long first name when you spell it all the way out. It's Kimberly, but it's KIMBERLEY BAUDRY at Dematic.com. Any of those places, you'll get through to me.
Awesome.
Well, Kim, we love having you on. I mean, I just get the total level set for the year about like how to think about what's coming. And so as I'm talking to companies, I'm talking to retailers, I'm talking to technology solutions. This always level sets me for like, okay, how are people thinking about this? What are they going to look at? What are they not? So I, on behalf of Anna and myself, we can't thank you enough for joining us again for what is it, the fourth or fifth time to start out 2025. So Kim, thank you for sitting down with us. And thanks to all of you that hit download and listen to today's podcast. And as always, on behalf of Ann, myself, and all of us at OmniTalk Retail, be careful out there.